For centuries, our own modern world has remained in ignorance concerning the great civilizations that preceded it. They ridiculed the thought that there might have been great civilizations precede them, but today it is generally admitted by the best minds working on the subject that mighty civilizations have preceded our own puny effort, and that the ground we walk upon is made up of the powdered bones of kings. Hundreds of feet under the earth lie civilizations undreamed of by the average individual, but this is an age of exploration, and one by one the secrets of the past are being rediscovered. The stratus of rock are giving up their secrets, and far down in the depths of the earth man is tunneling and burrowing like some gigantic mole. He is seeking for the records of his ancestry that he may know his progenitors, the crook-boned man and the piltdown savage. It was Plato who dreamed of the lost Atlantis, and his dream has been preserved into the hearts of exploring scientists and philosophers. Even today, we are still searching for more information concerning this ancient continent. There are four possible sources of information. The first is the crude stone carvings of the ancient world. The second is the weird mythological legends of ancient peoples. The third is geology, for the records of all things are preserved for the duration of the planet and the stratus of rock. The fourth source of information is the invisible spiritual records that are preserved in the memory of nature. These, of course, are far more complete than any of the others. First of all, let us sum up some of the interesting things that we are discovering about the prehistoric worlds. There is every proof of the fact that at some time in the past there was a race of great power. Members of this race traveled to all parts of the world carrying with them the symbolism and tradition of their people. The similarity between the Egyptian hieroglyphs and the languages of the American Indians is very striking. The curator of a well-known museum told me the other day that they were digging up the Tibetan antiques in Mexico. The Egyptian symbol of life was carved on the back of many of the great stone faces on the Easter Islands off the coast of South America. All these facts bespeak a lost culture which has vanished but left its mark upon the rocks and stones. There is a very wonderful legend found in the mythologies of almost all nations that tells about gods who came out of the sea. The American Indians tell of holy men dressed in birds' feathers, and one of them they came out of the blue waters and instructed them concerning the arts and sciences. Among the Chaldean legends, we have the story of Oannes and the man with the head of a fish who came out of the sea and taught his people to read and write, to till the ground, and to civilize themselves. Among the Maya of Central America, the god of good was called Quetzalcoatl, and those whose name means feathered snake. He too came out of the waters, and after instructing his people, rode out to sea on a raft of serpents to escape the wrath of fierce Aztec devil god. North, south, east, and west they come, the myths and stories of the great ones whose endless light came out of the sea and then returned again after leaving their arts and sciences with the primitive people. Who were these demigods that rose from the waters? Where did they come from, and where did they go when they left? Why is it that every nation has its first civilizer, one of the mysterious creatures that appeared from water? The average person has no answer to offer, but the mystery schools teach that these strange ones were Atlanteans, whose empire once stood where the waves of the Atlantic now roll. Let us now briefly consider what the ancient mystery schools had to teach concerning the Atlantean world. They tell us that there have been 5 continents. The first was called Pan and occupied under the polar caps. The second was called Ithaca and extended further downward from the poles. The third was called Lemuria and was a great continent connecting Australia, India, and the islands of the sea, and extending over towards the American continents. The fourth was Atlantis. This great continent occupied the Atlantic Ocean. It reached from Greenland on to the north to Africa and South America at the south. It concentrated Europe with the coast of North America. This great empire began to decline 1,000,000 years ago, but in the days of its glory, it was magnificent, a progressive empire. The Atlanteans did not build great numbers of cities. They built one great metropolis in the midst of their empire, which they called the City of the Golden Gates. They also built the 7 other great cities in the midst of the 7 provinces of Atlantis. One of these provinces seems to have been Egypt. The Atlanteans were masters of many arts and sciences, which we have entirely lost, especially among them the power of moving tremendous masses of rock, unbelievable distances. In the city of this Golden Gate stood the great university. We are told that it was the greatest institution of learning that the world will ever know. It covered literally miles. In the midst of it was a great pyramid with a broad flight of steps leading up each surface. On the top of this pyramid was an astronomical observatory where by means of stone instruments the Atlanteans studied the power and motion of the celestial bodies. Nearly all the arts and sciences which we have in the world today were given to man first in the great University of Atlantis. The Atlanteans were fabulously wealthy and roofed their temples in solid gold. They were the red men who are now only a group of scattered wanderers, but who then ruled the world. While our race were savage barbarians, gnawing bones in Central European caves and unworthy of great consideration, the city of the Golden Gates was the hub of the Atlantean world. The religion of Atlantis was sun worship, and from this root have grown all the religions of the modern world, with the exception of a few very ancient Lemurian cults, such as we find among the Bushmen of Australia and so forth. Outside of the will of Atlantean learning stretched wildernesses peopled by barbaric tribes of born yellow, white, and black men. As we send missionaries to spread our gospels in distant lands, so the Atlanteans sent their priests and missionaries to all parts of the world, where they educated the then ignorant natives in the arts and sciences which they had mastered. There is no doubt in the world that these missionaries sent forth from the city of the Golden Gates were the men who came out of the sea, for they brought the culture of the then most progressive civilization to the savage nations far less cultured than themselves. They came with the glory of their golden ornaments. They brought with them the Atlantean symbol of wisdom, the serpent. We have learned to call them the serpent kings or the progenitors of wisdom. Wherever they went, they built pyramids to duplicate the great pyramids in the city of the Golden Gates. This is the origin of the pyramids of Mexico and Yucatan. The mountains of the earth in Normandy and Britain are remnants of a similar culture as are the mounds built by the American Indians. All mound buildings can be traced directly or indirectly to the Atlantean culture. Navigation was thoroughly understood by this ancient race, and there are even records to the effect that they used systems of locomotion not unlike those we have today. They were the greatest propagandists that the world has ever known. They carried the message of the serpent everywhere, even into China, India, and Persia. In the midst of this great campaign for spreading their doctrine, and cataclysms which sank Atlantis began, and at last, just a few thousand years before the Christian era. The island of Poseidia, occupying the area near where the Azores Islands are today, sank, carrying with it 60 million people in 24 hours. This was the last of the great Atlantis. The priest kings who promised to return to their missionary settlements never came back, and gradually the people forgot where the secret doctrines had come from. At last, all they could remember was that they had come out of a place where the sea now is. The secret doctrines and keys were lost through the ages. The world of the red man was captured by the barbarians, and the culture of the new race took the place of the old. But still, each of these different groups faintly remember that in the dawn of the great gleaning godlike figures had came out of the heavens and planted the seeds of philosophy and religion among them. The demigods of the ancient world were the Atlantean priests. Their glory and power terrified the savage nations with whom they came in contact. The wandering aborigines bowed before the glorious figures clothed in cloth of gold and kissed the very ground where those demigods walked. There is no doubt that the day when the gods walked with man, that this has been preserved in myth and legend, is a day of Atlantean civilization. It is said that one of the rulers of Atlantis was called Zeus, who later became the god of the Greeks. The city of the gods, which every nation has preserved record of, was the glorious city of the Golden Gates, which to the savage nations that gathered outside of its walls seemed a supernatural and divine thing which they could not understand. The Great Pyramid of Egypt was copied from the University of the Secret Wisdom, and when Atlantis sank, a few survivors preserved the ancient doctrines of Egypt and Caldera, and then ancient red civilization of Egypt. Was a descendant of Atlantean culture. Over 40 great religions have grown out of the secret teachings of Atlantis, and nearly all of the Masonic mysteries can be traced to the Atlantean world. We owe more to Atlantis than we can ever hope to repay, but we also owe to this ancient nation all the wars and strife which we have. Atlantis began to fight. They were the beginning of war, and the curse of siege which they planted has followed every nation of the earth since. About 1 million years ago in northern India, our own race was born. It was called the Aryan race. Its first divisions were composed of what we now call Hindus, and they descended into the Indian peninsula, capturing and murdering the aboriginal peoples who dwelt there. Thus they begin to build that karma for which they are still paying. A few of the ancient people who were not killed became outcasts, whom the Hindus looked down upon as being of no account. Many of the modern Hindu dancing girls, who have neither social nor religious standing, but are merely the playthings of modern India, trace their ancestry back to the ancient races which the modern Hindus captured and practically exterminated. Gradually, the Aryan race spread, passing over into Europe and finally by coming to America. It has practically destroyed the last of the Atlanteans, the American Indians. Tomorrow, we are exterminated as today they are, for race after race rises and falls in the endless purgatory of human change. It was the Atlanteans, a million or more years ago, who first used the cross as a symbol of divinity, and they went forth converting the world in the name of the cross, which to them was the symbol of universal life. A great many of rituals and implements of modern Christianity have come up through the Atlantean civilization, for they were the progenitors. The ancients of days, who while we were still uncultured and uncouth ruled the world, wrote libraries and unfolded the principles of mathematics. Under the rolling waters of the Atlantic lies the city of the Golden Gates. The hub of the wheel is lost, and the spokes lie shattered around. The heart is dead, but still our own civilization carries on the primitive culture of Atlantis. We have added to it, but never made any very radical changes. We won't develop further than they did, but we have developed on the basis of their discoveries. When you read the stories of the gods and the demigods, do not look upon them any longer as supernatural creatures created out of the minds of savage nations, but view them rather as the priest kings, the missionaries who went forth from the city of the sun and carried the message of wisdom to all parts of the earth. It is through them that religion has its direct apostolic succession, for in each case these priests carried with them the implements and scarred relics blessed in the temple by the Golden Gates, and each of the serpent kings was ordained into the mysteries of the feathered snake of the Lord Serpent Kings. This is an introduction to an article which appeared 2 years ago in our magazine, The All-Seeing Eye. The number in which the article appeared has long been out of print, so we reproduce it here for those who are interested in the lesson the Atlantean civilization teaches of the world today.